So this is not a new idea by any means for local governments. Lots of places are doing this. Okay. And this is what they're doing. I've ordered by a great deal. So they were asked, do you collaborate a great deal, somewhat, or not at all in the following areas? And then I ordered it by the great deal. So 70% report collaborating a great deal in fire, 62% in 911, and so on. That's how you read that table. I think a couple interesting things here. I mean, one is that, in fact, some of the areas where scale economies are present really are the places where local units are collaborating a lot. Fire, 911, utilities. Some of these, though, don't represent those. So parks are really, sort of negative externalities, positive externalities. That's not really about cost savings. Maybe some. Maybe we can save on maintenance if we run our parks together, but most of the investment in parks is fixed, and so there's not a lot of sharing that can result in cost savings. Some of the areas that I'm going to point out later as being prime areas for units to move into to save some costs are IT and GIS, where a lot of places are just starting to do that. It can often be a lot easier to collaborate on a new service rather than reorganizing how you do a service right now, giving up some authority over doing something as opposed to taking on a new responsibility and being able to do that in a collaborative way from the beginning. There's a question over here.
Under fire, are just those multi-jurisdictional fire service areas considered, or does it go down to something as basic as mutual aid agreements?
Well, so the advantage and the disadvantage of this survey is we allow the unit to interpret it as they use the term collaboration. So in some places, it's probably interpreted in a more formal way. And I think you're really getting onto an important, a further important point, which is there really are differences in sort of norms. And so I don't know exactly whether, big cities are over-reporting and small townships under-reporting, or vice versa, or who is most likely to be including things like mutual aid agreements here, and who's most likely to leave them out. This study does not allow us to say that. The Citizens Research Council data breaks things out in more detail. Still, this mutual aid question is something that we can't get at directly, but since we look at more specific categories of fire service in the CRC survey, I think the issue that you raise is not as severe. Here it is because we felt that we didn't want to over-direct the respondents to say this is exactly what we mean by collaboration, but rather we wanted the respondents to tell us what they mean by collaboration. But in that particular case, we don't have the data to answer that particular question. Other questions?
Yeah, I'm not sure this is relevant, but do we have too many layers of government? I'm thinking townships, to be deep townships.
Well, I know. There are some folks here from the Township Association that I think can probably answer that question better than I can. But let me say that on the one hand, township governments are those facing the least fiscal stress in this data, and they're also often good partners in a lot of these collaborations. So I don't know that what I'm talking about right now can get us there, but I would love to, this could be a very interesting discussion amongst the group. These data, I don't think, address that issue directly. Townships in some ways are, doing a lot of what other units of government do, and so, it's not an easy. The answer to your question is not a simple answer. Let me put it that way. Is that delicate enough? Yeah. Yes, sir.
My wife, Ontario, a number of years ago, abolished townships as a unit of government.
Yes.
And you had cities, and you have the counties, and then the provincial government. We could do that in Michigan, but that'd be a real gutsy thing. Another real gutsy thing, I got a publication about that thick from our Hingham County treasurer. And it listed all the properties and all the delinquent taxes. Millions and millions and millions of dollars that could be collected. Well, who owes it? I looked Deutsche Bank, page after page after page, and another bank, page after page after page. No wonder they don't have any money to operate. You can't collect it, they aren't able to. Legislature could do quite a bit forcing that money to come forward.
I think that's clearly, I think the question of tax delinquent properties is huge here. It's a different question than collaboration, of course, but it all feeds into the same issue of if local governments want to continue providing high-quality services, which they do, they need to be able to pay for it, or they need to find ways to deliver them differently. And those are two, I think that the issue of how to collect delinquent taxes is a really, really, really important problem. I'm going to move right on away from the township question, but let me just say one thing before I do about it. I personally am totally agnostic on this. I'm not an advocate. I love local government. You all know that, but I don't take a position on the question of townships, good or bad, yes or no. But I will say that I had a group of students last semester working on a project in Lenawee County, which is in south central Michigan, where they interviewed officials, face-to-face interviews in every local unit in the township, in the county, including all of the townships. And it was really interesting to hear them talk about how people think about their governments. And, the notion of doing away with, first of all, townships don't do much and they don't charge a lot of money. I mean, people don't pay a lot of taxes to their townships, but the services that the townships provide are very dear to the people who live in those local units. And so it's not an administrative issue. There's a really big political issue here. And so it's not just about, again, there is a cost element, but there are really big citizen connections to these local units, which I think, obviously can't be disregarded. And so, this will be a discussion that we have in Michigan, I think, going forward, is what is the role of townships as we think about the cost of government. But clearly, the notion that you can just easily save a bunch of money by eliminating townships, I think is not on the table. It's not the way people in the townships think about that. So it's thorny, it's tricky. I'm going to move on to the next slide. And the reason I brought this slide is just to give you a sense of what are some of the things that local officials in local units are reporting as being either things that encourage them to collaborate, or things that discourage them from collaboration, or things that are not relevant, right? And so what I've done is started with the top 4 reported reasons for collaboration, and then gone to the top 4 reported disincentives to collaboration, and then gone to the top 4 not a factor. Okay, does that make sense? So there are 12 items total. So these are the top. Oh, I did it again. The top 4 reasons for collaborating, the top 4 disincentives, and then the 4 things that are reported as at the highest proportions as being not relevant. Okay, and the things that I want to point out are 62%. Okay, now I have confused myself because I don't know if I transpose these 2 or if I transpose these 2. This is the problem with brand new data. So one of these 2, reducing costs and improving quality, are clearly these 2, I should say, whichever one is the top, it's only a 4 percentage point difference, so it's not a big difference. These are the 2 major factors encouraging cooperation: the desire to reduce cost and the desire to improve quality. it's important to note, though, that whether this is 62 or 66, whichever it is, 2/3 of the respondents who report that they're collaborating are not doing it to save costs. Many of them are